Hello, and welcome to Stowe Talks, a podcast designed to support people going through a relationship breakdown and all of the challenges this brings. I'm Matthew Taylor.
And I'm Lisa Gatchell, family lawyers at Stowe Family Law. And today we are joined by Jodie Phelps, a leading financial planner, to look at why financial well-being is so important following separation and share some top tips on how to achieve it. So thank you, Jodie, for coming along today and speaking to us. Can you start by just introducing yourself to our listeners?
Yeah, sure. So, hi, I'm Jodie Phelps. I'm a financial planner, qualified in all different areas of financial advice. I'm self-employed, and the areas that I really love kind of helping people with financial well-being, financial education. Yeah, and really kind of empowering people during life situations where they really need the help.
Okay, so obviously divorce and separation being a sort of key one of those areas, which is a really stressful, difficult time. So we're going to hopefully delve into some really useful tips for people when they're navigating a relationship breakdown about how to come out of it with some sort of sense of financial well-being. But how do you define financial well-being? What's the sort of starting point for that area?
Yeah, I think a lot of people, as soon as there's a word financial, would assume it means how much money you've got. But it's not that at all. It's more your kind of relationship with money, how you feel about money, the emotions that kind of come into your mind when you're thinking about money, and really how comfortable you are with managing it. So yes, it's not really about how much you've got. It's just by feeling kind of financially savvy and making the most of what you've got.
I think it's interesting. A lot of people, and probably myself included, have got slightly odd relationships with money, and it sometimes feel a really awkward thing to talk about, or it can be embarrassing, or there's a bit of stigma in having discussions. Do people, irrespective of the sort of divorce stuff that we'll come on to, do you think, people can have some quite interesting and quite difficult relationships with money anyway as a starting point?
Yeah, I think one thing I'd say is money is seems to be a massive taboo subject. So I think we're all made to believe it's rude to talk about money. So it's a bit of a strange one, really. We don't tend to talk about it. I was reading something the other day and it said everyone's more happy speaking about their sex lives than they are about money. And I think what with the kind of lack of financial education, it's really important we are talking about it and we're sharing tips. Like, how are we supposed to be managing it and understanding it if we're not talking about it?
And where do you think that comes from, that sort of the stigma stuff? Is that the lack of kind of education at a young age? Is it a bit of, stiff upper lipness? Where does that kind of nervousness come from, do you think?
I think it's a few things. I think people are made to feel kind of embarrassed if they're having money problems, which is a massive issue. If you're embarrassed about it, you tend to kind of bury your head in the sand, and which is the worst thing you can possibly do. If you're worrying, financially, actually burying your head in the sand, it just everything keeps happening. Everything keeps getting worse and worse. When actually the best thing you can do is kind of pause, talk about it, make a plan. So I think first of all, it's people feeling embarrassed if they're worried about money. I think there's also a stigma if you're sat there saying, do you know what, I've got this much in savings and I earn this much money. It's like you're showing off, So it's kind of that. I think it is, it's the British thing, isn't it? Like we've all got a lot of pride and we're all kind of embarrassed. I think I was reading the other day, there was a study that say American people are a lot better at speaking about money, and I think it is that kind of our culture, I guess.
That doesn't surprise me.
No.
I know.
Doesn't surprise me at all. Yeah. I mean, you've talked there about, people being embarrassed about money and potentially digging their head in the sand and not having these conversations. What effect, though, can that have on people?
I think it can just get a lot worse. I think your financial well-being plays a massive part in your mental well-being. I think, as we all know, mental well-being is spoken about a lot, and there's been a lot of focus on it, especially since kind of COVID and the effect that had on everybody. When you're struggling financially, it can have impacts on your kind of relationships, your career, hobbies. It can cause, stress, anxiety, sleep problems. So it has a massive impact on your overall mental well-being. And I think sitting down and making a plan, even to get yourself out of a situation, or even just to know you're making best use of your money, can go such a long way. And, you can just tick that section off and then your focus can be on, other important things in your life.
What's the first thing that somebody could do if they have been one of those people that haven't really been managing their money very well, or have just been ignoring problems that are there and it's causing them to be anxious, depressed, worried? What's that first step that you would advise they do to get a better relationship with their money?
I think it's really good to understand your relationship with money. Think about why you manage your money the way you do. So, do you feel anxious or stressed, or what are your current emotions around them and why? And a lot of our upbringing, our upbringing does impact on how we manage money a lot. I'm sure I'll say to both of you guys, what phrase can you think of from your childhood? And it might be something like money doesn't grow on trees.
That's exactly what I went to. Exactly what I went to.
Yeah. And if you've had really cautious parents, and they really don't spend a lot of money and they save and they're worried, it's almost like anxious kind of that side of it, that might then affect you and how you spend money. So yeah, it is a bit about understanding your early experiences and how that could influence you now. And then it's really thinking about actually what does money mean to you? And what are your beliefs and values? And actually, let's try to think about that rather than just going into our auto mode, which is probably what we're trained to do. And also, if you haven't had a very good role model growing up and it's someone who's been in a lot of debt and, spends unnecessarily, that can also make, you haven't learned about budgeting, about saving, about not getting into debt. So it's a really good idea to have a think about your current relationship with money. And then think about, where do you want to get to? What are your current issues? Look back on, mistakes you've made financially. Why do you think you made them mistakes? And how can you do things better? So once you've kind of understood the psychology of it, I could speak about that all day, but I think really the first thing you should do is just sit down with somebody, obviously a professional advisor ideally, but if not, even a friend or family member. Just sit down and say, I'm worried, or, what have you. And then the first step is really just making a plan. Make yourself a plan. Get everything on the table. What debts have you got? What savings have you got? What's your income, outgoing? Let's make a plan to make sure you are making the most of your money and achieving your goals. Get into where you want to be.
Do you think that creating that plan and having that really good practical base of things is that what helps to then take control of the situation and then maybe manage some of those kind of psychological hang-ups from your parents saying, money doesn't grow on trees or whatever? Is that really the starting point to help you with the psychological element of things?
Yeah, I think it's proven, isn't it, that if you've got a plan in place, if something's measured, you're going to improve. So I think even if it's annually, sit down, make a plan for the year. And if you fail, then it doesn't matter. But actually each year saying, how did you get on? What could you do better? And things like making sure you're saving a little bit per month. If you've got a payment then that automatically goes out, you won't even remember, you'll forget about out of sight, out of mind. So actually things like that, then you'll just carry on your everyday life and not realise you're saving, even if it's £50 a month, that's going separately. So having that plan and putting things in place, it's not just, a written down plan, it's actually doing things from that plan, arranging how much you're going to pay off your debts or how much you're going to put into savings, reviewing your bills, so it's actually doing something off the back of that plan, I guess. So I think it will really make a difference.
Yeah, it's a bit of like, therapy for me now. I have a really good plan every month. Dead good at it. My spreadsheet looks brilliant to the penny. It's really good. I follow it for maybe 30 seconds and then we just ignore it the rest of the month. If someone else is having that problem and can go through the planning stage and then suddenly 3 days later it's like, takeaway, or, I need to order some stuff on Amazon, and suddenly there's a few of those things. What would you be saying to me to make me actually do what I say that I know that I should do?
Well, I'd say, first of all, well done. It's good that you've got the good intention.
Thanks. All right. Okay. That's it. We'll stop there, shall we? Well done. We're out.
I think, you're human. I think not, and unfortunately in my world, I see a lot of kind of bad things happen, or, things don't go to plan. So I think you do have to be able to live a little. So I think in your plan, you need to give yourself a budget for a takeaway a week. If that's what you really enjoy, life's, not just about doing the most sensible thing all the time. It's actually, and if you do see yourself, actually, I keep tripping up because I keep spending money on a takeaway every week, incorporate that into the plan. But I know I'm going to not be able to achieve that bit, so I'm going to let myself have a couple of takeaways. So I think maybe just then reassess it. Why didn't it work? Why are you making those mistakes? But yeah, also don't be hard on yourself. Having a plan and trying to stick to it is better than having no plan at all.
I think people, you say budget and you say plan, and people think, austerity. Like, I can't put something nice on there. And there is something about that in kind of, you've got to make it realistic, don't you? I guess, and kind of knowing yourself is part of that.
Yeah, and it can be as basic as you want it to be. It can literally be, right, I've got this much coming in. I'm going to put this much of it into a spending account, and that's what I'm going to try to spend each month. Like something like that's really simple. So it doesn't have to be, I know, like you say, budget plan, it all can be quite overwhelming, but it doesn't have to be. It's really just feeling on top of what's going on. Like the amount of people I speak to and they don't know how much they've got coming in each month. They don't know what their outgoings are. And I'm like, how can you feel at peace with your kind of financial well-being if you don't even know what's going on? So yeah, it's understanding what you've got coming in, going out, it makes a huge difference.
Yeah, it sounds like the old-fashioned like cash envelopes, isn't it? You get your salary and you put X amount for shopping and X amount for petrol and X amount for like mortgage and things. And obviously we don't work, well, very few of us work in cash these days. But there's, I guess from what you're saying, there's still elements that you can do that by having separate accounts set up for different things and having money transferred each month.
Oh, definitely. And I think, yeah, that is the kind of 50, 30, 20, I think it was, wasn't it? That they'd always designate to each one. But I think having everything going into one account can be quite overwhelming, and you haven't got a plan there. So even if you just sit down and say, right, I'm going to have an account for spending, one for saving and one for bills, like it just makes such a difference. And even when you're planning, when you're giving yourself that annual time to kind of look at your plans, like setting yourself short-term and long-term goals, I think segmenting different parts of your finances can be really helpful, because you think, actually, in a year's time I want to pay for a holiday, 5 years time I want to move house, and actually you can have two savings accounts then, got a little bit going into that one and a little bit going for that plan. And I think the psychology of then knowing what the money's for, the end goal, is really what helps you save. Because actually, like Matt, you were saying, before you go and spend that money on a takeaway, then you sort of remind yourself, do you know what, that savings pot there, so I can move to a bigger house in 3 years. So it's just remembering why you're doing it. It's not just doing it because it's the right thing to do, but it's actually remembering, why am I saving this money? Or even if it's paying off debt, I really want to pay off that credit card so I can then start saving and go on holidays, remembering that reason why. I think personally, one thing I'd do is if I feel a bit stressed or, had a rubbish day, my go-to would be to go and buy myself some clothes online. Which
bit of retail therapy, yeah.
Exactly. But for me, I know that's I find myself browsing, I'm like, well, I don't need to buy these clothes, like I'm clearly just feeling a bit rubbish. So I think having in your toolkit other things you enjoy doing. So for me, it might be, having a nice long bath and a face mask, or calling a friend, going for a walk. And it's thinking, actually, rather than, Matt, I'm going to go and have that third takeaway of the week, it's actually, I'm going to call my friend, or going to go and go for a run or something.
I like to stress I'm not quite that unhealthy for three a week. Like, this is, I mean, well, yeah, maybe I am. No, that's all really useful, and I think the mindset point is really a really helpful thing. And people often don't think about money as being a psychological thing, and I think everyone's got different relationships with it. Now, obviously, that's going to change a great deal when you come to divorce and separation. So let's kind of unpick that a little bit, I guess. So when you are seeing clients who are going through divorce or just divorce, what do you find are the main focuses of things that they need to kind of take on to rediscover or maintain their financial well-being?
It's really hard when you're going through something like that. I've personally gone through divorce myself, and I was working in finance at the time, almost 7 years ago now. And even I found it really overwhelming. You're going from two incomes to one income, outgoings are changing, you might have to sell a house, so you've got so much going on. So I think it's the first thing is be kind to yourself. You don't have to have all of the answers straight away. I always say to clients, I'm like, right, let's just focus on, these are the things we need to do, let's just focus on one at a time. And even if 1 week you think, do you know what, I'm gonna, like, the first thing I'll say to them is, let's make a budget planner, let's see what we think your outgoings are going to be, because from there, that's when we can make a plan. So I say, even if it's the first week, all I want you to do is write down what your current outgoings are. And sometimes it is hard to know what they're going to be, but kind of understanding what you spend at the moment is a good first step. And I think the other side of it is financial education. A lot of people going through separation, they weren't necessarily the one who did, manage the money. And even, I see couples all the time, and there's always one of them in the relationship who seems to take on that money side of it. If you are the person who didn't do that, it's understanding, what is an ISA, what is a pension, these real kind of things that we're not taught in school that we should be. It's actually understanding their current financial position. Yeah, so I think it all depends on who I'm speaking to and what their situation is. But I think first of all, understanding where you're at for then trying to make a plan.
And when someone is, looking at kind of getting ready, maybe let's take a little step back, and then rather than going through divorce, is someone who's maybe thinking, oh, it's going to happen. And what we hear quite a lot, I'm sure Lisa does as well, is I will speak to people who have that sort of initial inquiry and look, my relationship's not going too well, we might be splitting up, but I'm really scared because I don't know how it's going to be, and I don't know if I'm going to be able to support myself. I don't know if I'm going to have to move out of the house. How can you get into a position financially where you can sort of be able to make those big decisions with perhaps a little bit more security, or at least awareness of what's going to happen?
So do you mean if it's someone who's wanting to relieve a relationship and they're worried about the finance?
Yeah, or they worry that they are going to be left. I mean, we get it both ways, but sometimes there are people who say, look, the relationship's gone wrong, but it's okay, and we're sort of muddling along, but I couldn't go because, I can't support myself or whatever it is. And, how do you deal with that kind of, that fear?
Yeah. I think this is, not really my financial head, but my personal head is, if you're unhappy, you've got to do something about it. And I think there always will be a way. And I think, I think someone said to me before I separated, it was like, actually, if you really know that needs to happen, you do it, and things will fall into place. And I think, having a look at things like sitting down with somebody and actually having a look at the money side of it might give you that reassurance, because I'd say 99% of people I speak to, they think they're not going to be okay, but they are. And it's like, it's just finding a new path. You're used to X amount of income, and it's just actually, what does your new path look like? It's not going to be the same as it did before. So I think anyone kind of thinking they're going to go through it, or, wanting to go through it, I'd just say probably become a bit financially savvy, because if you're ahead of the game, then that's the best thing. Like, start having them conversations, even do your own research online, understand what you've got at the moment, where you are, what your budget looks like, and so speak to a professional.
And where's good to go for that? If someone is thinking, right, I'm going to start Googling, and you could end up down all sorts of rabbit holes and things, do you have some sort of easy resources for anyone listening to this who just needs a bit of a kind of, crash course in how to start managing the finances a bit better?
I've got a budget planner that I can share probably online that people can access. And there are also a couple of apps you can download, which are kind of money management apps that I'd recommend. I think, there is a lot of kind of, if you type anything into Google, but what I'd say is it's a bit of a minefield. So I would say speak to a financial advisor. I think most financial advisors will offer that first appointment. There's no charge. So having that, I'd try to find a professional really, and sit down with them and just speak things through, or even going into your bank. The staff in the bank might be able to kind of help you understand things.
And if someone's worried about having that appointment with a financial advisor because, perhaps they feel like their finances are an absolute mess and that they're going to be judged and they're not sure what's going to happen. It's a bit like when they kind of ring up to have a first appointment with a lawyer, they kind of have in their mind what a lawyer is like and what that appointment's going to be like, and that can be quite daunting. How would you put somebody at ease? What's that first appointment really going to be like for them?
Really, it's just about getting to know each other. Like for me, it's like me understanding their position. I think I always try to make people feel really relaxed. I think there's no judgment. It's like if you think about when you go to a doctor and you've got an embarrassing problem, you think actually the amount of people they've seen with different problems, it's nothing's ever going to really shock me. All I do all day long, and for the last 13 years, is speak to people about money. So most of us have seen all sorts. It's not like we're like, oh, it's quite a lot. It just doesn't help that. And really, I just want to help people, and I'm sure other people do. I just want to make someone feel better. And if at the end of that appointment they think, do you know what, it's really helped, made me feel better, then great. That's what you want to hear. So yeah, there's no judgment, and I think finding the right person to speak to, like a lot of it is the rapport in that first meeting, and hopefully if I'm speaking to somebody, we will have that rapport and it'll feel fine. And if someone has an appointment and don't feel like that, then perhaps they're not the right financial advisor, because you do need to feel, same with the solicitor, you need to feel like you can speak to them and be honest with them, because if you're not being honest, how can we help?
And what about helping people to sort of gauge what income level they'll need? I think one of the problems we come across quite a lot in divorce is, you talked about it, is going from two incomes to one income, and in 99.9% of the cases, there's going to be a drop in the standard of living because the expenditure has to drop. I think that's a really hard thing for people to visualize and to know what that means. How can people start to think about, okay, well, what am I actually going to need going forwards? I know we've always spent X on a holiday, but maybe we can't afford that. What's the kind of process for getting to some sort of kind of future plan where you don't necessarily have all the evidence right in front of you at that point in time?
Yeah, I think one thing you do need to realise when you go through separation is that things are going to change. You're not going to be able to live the way you did before, really. I think going through, I know I keep saying it, but going through the kind of your outgoings and what you're spending money on, actually which ones really are essential. Going through, obviously food, you have to buy petrol, but things like your current like TV subscriptions, like how many are you paying for? Are you paying for Amazon, Netflix, Prime, like
yes,
all
of them.
Yes.
Yes.
Disney,
yes. Yeah, Disney, yes. Yeah, like for one program on each.
Yeah, and the amount of people I've spoken to, we go through it and they're like, oh, I don't even know what that is. And they're paying for something, they're like, don't even realise there's some subscription. So I think actually going through what do you actually really need, what are essential and what are luxury. And it may be for the next few years, you need to cut down on the luxury, because actually this separation is what's happening right now. And yeah, so I think it's knowing that things are going to change a little bit. But yeah, have a look at your outgoings. What can you change? What won't have a massive impact on your lifestyle? When I went through divorce, I got rid of my nice car, and I got rid of like Sky TV and just had Netflix. But little things like that, actually, like, because you don't want to be worried about money every month. You don't. So what you want to do is cut down to a level that you've still got a little bit of money to enjoy, go and socialise with. So yeah, so I think really just understanding of your outgoings, what are essential. And then from there, what I do with my clients is we do something called cash flow forecasting, where we put in, their current income, what their outgoings are, and then we plan for future events. So, and it will show on a graph, without getting too technical, can they afford what their current income is? And if not, what more income do they need? And then it's like, okay, what changes can they make? And we kind of keep playing around with them numbers, the income and outgoings, until we get a comfortable middle. But that's like things like, when you're thinking about how much to spend on a house, it might be that you keep a little bit back because you need to top up your income for the first couple of years. Or it's about kind of thinking of where you want to be, making a plan to get there, and then adjusting things to make it happen. And also, like, thinking about, actually, is that plan realistic? Is that what can happen right now? And just because it can't happen right now, actually life changes all the time. We don't know what's happening going forward. And then things like, actually, once you're divorced, invest in time in yourself. What course could I do at work to get me a promotion? Or investing in yourself so that you could potentially then generate more income.
And what about people who've been possibly a bit scarred from the financial the sort of financial psyche in the marriage? So we'll speak to people who, their spouse was very controlling over the finances, and maybe, this person wanted to have some control but didn't. But it's been very regimented. They've been a real kind of spendthrift, and nothing gets spent without proof and evidence. And there's a kind of a guilt behind spending things, because that can live on, those scars, on a 10, 15, 20-year marriage really kind of cut deep. Is that something you see a lot of people that kind of almost then need a bit of permission to spend?
Yeah, it is. And I think with people who've been through that, it really is just baby steps. And it's a lot of it is then thinking about the psychology side of it and the well-being side of it. And that's when I'll try to empower people to, you can spend money, you can treat yourself for, what do you enjoy spending money on? And let's put in your budget £50 to go for coffee a few times a month or what have you. Everyone's so different. A lot of people need, reining in, but a lot of people do need to be able to spend money. And I see a lot of people who are elderly and they've got so much, money sat there, but they feel guilty spending it. And it's because they lived through, might have lived through a bit of the war and were used to rationing. And I think it's a really interesting topic. But I think, people who have been unfortunately in those abusive relationships, it's a lot of it is about overcoming those barriers and allowing them to realize, actually you can spend money and feel safe spending it. And I suppose it would just be for me more meetings probably, and a bit of reflection time, and taking things at baby steps and help them to not feel overwhelmed really.
And if they go through all of that with you and they've got a plan and it seems to be working, is that it then, or should they be reviewing that plan? And if they should be reviewing it, how often? Are we talking 6 monthly, yearly, every 5 years? What would you recommend?
I'd say at least once a year to sit down and do it. I think for me, January is my time when I think, do you know what, I'm going to make my financial goals, my personal goals, what do I want to achieve this year? But I'd say on top of that, if anything big changes in your life, that's when to review it. So if you're made redundant, if you're changing job, if you're due to retire, if you're going through a separation, if you're having a child, all these things are going to impact your finances. So if any of these things happen, how is that going to impact you, and what changes do you need to make? For example, if you haven't had a baby, then obviously it might be that you've got less fun money now, and money for
no fun money. All fun money goes. All fun goes.
It all goes on takeaways because you can't cook.
Yeah. Okay, so I think that's all been really super helpful. I mean, it would just be handy to get kind of like, for people who've been listening who are thinking a bit motivated to get on top of things, so, some real good practical steps. So, I wonder if you could just run through maybe a brief kind of list of top tips for people that can take away and take some action on these things now.
Yeah, sure. So I think I'd say my top tips, I've got the first one, I'd understand why money's important, like what you're trying to achieve, what's your end goal. So for example, like we said, when you go to spend money on something you shouldn't, you remember why. Set yourself short and long-term goals. So what are you trying to achieve? Are you trying to pay off debt? Are you trying to save so you can move house? But yeah, have the short-term ones and the long-term ones. Create yourself a budget. So yeah, I'll share a budget planner. I think for anybody listening who hasn't done it, just write down all your, understand, what have you got coming in? What have you got going out? And even that will make you feel better because you understand where you are, which helps you with your financial well-being. Pay off debts, review any kind of credit cards or loans and have a look at the interest you're paying on them. Yeah, I see a lot of people with really high interest credit cards and they don't realize that actually each month they're paying off, most of it's going on interest rather than actually the money that they owe. Save when you can. So always try to save a little bit, not only for goals, but just to have a bit of a safety net. I always try to recommend as a target, as a goal, to have between 3 to 6 months of outgoings in a separate account, just in case something does happen, you need a bit of money, just having that security there. Review your household bills. So have a look, like I said, the Netflix, do you need to be paying for Netflix and Prime and Disney? Review your current products as well, like stay on top of your mortgage rate, when's that coming to an end? Review your pension, review your savings, make sure you're getting the best rates where possible. Be aware of bad spending habits. So like I mentioned with me, a bit of retail therapy can make you feel good at the time. And then 3 days later when you get the parcel, you probably regret buying something. So yeah, be aware of those bad spending habits and just think of even have a little list in your phone of other things that make you feel good. And then perhaps go to one of them when you feel yourself about to buy something you probably shouldn't. I'd say ensure you're protected. So as I mentioned, if things don't go the way you want to, make sure, even understanding if you work for a company, the benefits there, what happens if you are off sick, and just making sure you've got something there to kind of protect you if you can't work or if anything else happens. And then, yeah, I'd say like educate yourself so you are financially savvy. It's good to understand money, even if you look up like what is an ISA if you don't know, or just start trying to understand money a bit more. And then, yeah, finally, I'll just say make sure you review your plan at least once a year, and if you have any kind of big life events.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jodie. That was so helpful. So that's it for this episode of Stowe Talks. Thanks for listening. You can find out more about the work Jodie does by connecting with her on LinkedIn. If you would like more information on our podcast, head over to stowetalks.co.uk and please rate, like, share and review this podcast where you can.